Hello, my name is Christopher C. I'm an addict and an alcoholic. My last drink and drug was on October 4th, 2013. In this talk, I not only want to explain how I regained my relationship with my higher power, also give some insight in how I was able to open the gates of hell and release my spirit from insanity and my inner demons due to drug addiction and alcoholism. I'd like to give a little background into why I self-medicated and how I thought nothing or no power could ever stop the insanity of my addiction. I grew up in an Italian Catholic family where I felt that I was just collateral to my parents, always the pawn in an argument between them. You see, my brother Albert was the firstborn son into my family. In my mother's eyes, he could do no wrong. In my family, I always perceived that I was judged by my brother's standards. I never had a loving relationship with my mother. I felt that I was always being compared to my brother in everything I did. Academics, health, and lifestyle. My household was always full of tension and anger. My mother was always angry at the world, and specifically me. I never really knew why she was always angry with me. I always thought it was because my room was a mess. Considering anything I ever wanted to do, my mother always made sure my room was clean. My parents' marriage was not what you would call a loving one. They were constantly arguing, slamming doors, and staying in separate rooms. I never really remember a happy, quote, family when I was a child. I always just assumed that once you get married, you are always pissed off and hate your life. You pop out some kids to hopefully bring your love closer, but in reality, it only pulls your love apart. To this day, I don't think my parents ever loved each other. When I was in 6th grade, my mind went through some heavy changes. I remember doing my homework one night, and all of a sudden, I became real panicked, nauseous, and I began sweating. I didn't know what it was, maybe just a cold. My thoughts started racing, and I began to cry. I didn't want to tell anyone because I was afraid I would have been yelled at or told to go clean my room. Something was happening to me, and I knew it was different. I was having my first panic attack. With the panic attack came depression. I would be sad all the time at school and afraid to go to sleep at night because I didn't know if I was going to wake up. I was infatuated with the idea of death and what it would feel like to die. I was scared to kill myself, though. I thought maybe if I went to sleep one night, I just wouldn't wake up and I would start to feel better. I always thought I was not like the other kids. I didn't know anyone who was having the feelings that I had. I always felt like an outsider looking in. On the outside, I tended to be just a normal kid, but on the inside, I was nervous, anxious, and scared. I always felt that I never fit in, that I was different. I was enrolled in CCD classes, getting ready to be confirmed. I figured I would pray and talk with God to help me through what I was going through, because I certainly knew I couldn't talk to my parents about this. I prayed, and yet I still had these feelings. What God would let his child feel this way for no reason? These feelings were getting worse, and I had no outlet. I would overeat, and while I was eating, I was thinking about the next time I was going to eat. Eating was my only outlet in how I dealt with these feelings, and especially my mother. At dinner time was when the 20 questions, quote, would arise. It was a time my mother can spread her wrath of hatred to her sons, and especially the disappointment, which I certainly was made to feel. I was already an addict, and I didn't even know it. When I was 15, my parents finally decided to part ways in a divorce. I can remember the night that they told me. My brother had to come home from college to console me because I was having no part of my parents trying to make me feel better. It seemed that my mother wanted to get out of the house and live her life without me. She wanted her own place so she can be happy, as she put it. My mindset was that she was my mother and she was supposed to care for my happiness, not to be selfish and only think about herself. My mother's priorities were already in mind, so off she went. I decided to stay with my father because I wanted no part of the lifestyle she wanted to gain from the divorce. I was really close to my father, and I knew that living with him would not only help me, but help him too, since the black cloud left the building. I really leaned on my father in my adolescent years. I think my father also leaned on me as well. My father and I are very similar. We have similar brain structures, thought processes, and above all, alcoholism. After my parents divorced, I chose not to be like all the other kids whose parents were divorced. I didn't want to act out or do poorly in school. I excelled in school and behaved just to rebel against everyone who assumed I would turn out to be a bad teenager. Because of this, I never really had an outlet of my emotions. It wasn't until I got to college that these emotions let loose, in the form of self-harm. Because I chose not to be rebellious in my high school years, my actions and behavior occurred years later instead of in my adolescence. I still felt that I didn't fit in with anyone. I still felt like an outsider. The only difference was I couldn't keep these feelings bottled up anymore, and I had to let them out. Cutting seemed like the only answer at the time. Cutting let me release my emotions through pain. I knew that while I was cutting myself, I would be able to have a break from what was going on inside my thoughts. My depression and anxiety would subside for a little while. But cutting was only a temporary solution to a deep problem. Cutting also left marks, and people may ask questions. That is when I discovered alcohol. Maybe I should have known alcohol was going to be a problem when the first time I drank alcohol in college. I couldn't put it down. I thought that was a miracle potion. I felt happy, numb, and my feelings were suppressed. At parties, I was outgoing. I wasn't hiding in the corner waiting for people to leave. My social anxiety was lifted. I could talk to girls, and they would talk back to me. How amazing was alcohol? There was one problem with alcohol. The next morning, my first hangover happened the morning after I first touched alcohol. I had alcohol poisoning, and I didn't even know it. I was puking and shaking for 2 days. I felt like I had the flu. I remember calling my father for help, and he just laughed and said, go to the store and get some crackers, Alka-Seltzer, and grape juice, and just deal with it. My father was always touched by this because I was not afraid to tell him that I drank. I was calling for help. I remember lying in bed praying to God, asking for him to make me feel better, and I will never drink again. Well, after 2 days, I started feeling better, and off I went drinking the next weekend. It's funny how quick an alcoholic's memory can go away. I became obsessed with alcohol until I met marijuana. Marijuana can get me out of my head for a little while, boost my creativity, and not have the morning hangover. In the beginning, I would only smoke weed periodically, just like the alcohol, only on the weekends. By age 20, smoking turned into a nightly ritual due to my obsessive behavior. I became so obsessed with smoking that I started to smoke cigarettes. Cigarettes were cool for about a week until my addict of a brain became obsessed with them too. I still never thought I had a problem because alcohol and cigarettes were legal, and weed was something musicians smoked, and it was non-addictive. At this point in my life, I was still extremely depressed and was always anxious. I also had trouble focusing for long and even short periods of time. The only time I was able to focus was when I was drunk or high, or at least I thought. I was seeing my doctor and he was trying different medication cocktails, none that worked because I never gave them a chance. I was looking for a miracle drug that could take and all of my problems would be gone, just like alcohol and weed did. The fact was, abusing alcohol specifically counteracted any medicine my doctor was prescribing, making me think nothing was working. Between the age of 21 and 25 was when my alcoholism and addiction progressed. Addiction is a progressive disease. It takes some time to climax. The problem with me was I never admitted I was an alcohol or addict, so I didn't know things were getting worse. I was in denial, thinking that I needed to self-medicate because no real medication would work. I told myself that I had a stressful job, stressful mother, and was dealt this shitty hand called life. Drugs and alcohol let me deal with this life. I never realized that the problem was really me. By the time I turned 25, I was going to the bar multiple times a week. I loved the bar, the dim lights, great music, and alcohol. I tended to go to bars that were quiet so I can be alone. I would ask fellow drinking friends to come out once in a while too, but I liked the freedom of a bar, surrounded by people like me, people getting away from their problems. I still didn't think I was an alcoholic because I didn't drink every day. I was what you would call a binge drinker, one who drinks to get drunk in short periods of time. Getting to the bar also required you to get home from the bar. Since I always drove to the bar, I always had to drive home. I could have gotten a ride, but I didn't want to bother anyone each and every night I drank. What I was really thinking was I didn't want anyone to know how often I went out to drink. I drove when I was drunk. I never got a DWI, but I've been pulled over, only given the ability to talk my way out of being drunk. Looking back on it now, I don't know how I didn't kill anyone, let alone myself. Maybe that was God looking out for me, and I didn't even realize it then. I didn't realize it then because I had lost any relationship I had with God. I had lost my relationship with Him because I tended to blame Him for the feelings I had. I blamed Him for not helping me initially when I asked Him to help. With all the intake of drugs and alcohol, my ability to focus began to decrease. I was having trouble paying attention for more than 5 or 10 minutes. I decided to see a psychiatrist about this and see if there was any medication to help me focus, which I already knew there was. The doctor prescribed me Vyvanse, which is an extended-release amphetamine. This drug seemed to work miracles for me. I was energized, focused, and my craving for alcohol diminished. While on this drug, nothing else mattered because everything was falling into order. The only problem was the medication didn't work as strong and longer as you took it. So I began to abuse it with the addition of sleeping pills so I can offset the side effects of insomnia. My body couldn't handle the ups and downs in the course of a day, and I finally crashed. Crash lasted 4 days, and I once again prayed to God that I would never use drugs or alcohol again if He got me better. Well, I finally started to feel better, and I figured that since I was feeling better, I can start drinking again. But my mind was still set on the feeling I had with amphetamines. So I started to drink again and use cocaine to offset the side effects of alcohol. This worked until the habit of alcohol and cocaine became too expensive, and I got the bright idea to start using heroin. Heroin was my friend, my wife, my religion, my God. It took away all of my problems, gave me the same effects of alcohol, but without the hangover. I knew the drug was addictive, but I told myself not to do it more than 2 days in a row so I would never get sick or hooked. Well, like any addict, I became addicted to heroin and didn't know how to stop. It was with heroin that I really tested my faith with God, my higher power, and my life. It was with heroin that I nearly lost everything in my life, including my life. I was 28 when I first picked up heroin. Heroin started as small doses. It was relatively cheap compared to my weekly endeavors with alcohol and cocaine. Like any addiction, the habit and tolerance begins to get worse and then more expensive. With alcohol, I tended to be still functioning. I would never drink at work or miss commitments because of drinking. But with my addiction to heroin, I started to change. I began doing unthinkable things to continue my habit. I started to mess up my job, my relationships, my higher power, and my faith. I started to do everything to finance the habit. I would do anything to not feel what it felt like to withdraw from heroin. My first withdrawal from heroin should have been a wake-up call, but it wasn't. Despite that first withdrawal, I still needed to get out of my head, and heroin did that for me. It took all of my problems away, but giving me 10 times as many problems in the long run. My addiction to heroin progressed into an everyday, all-day habit. I would sell belongings to get enough money to get it. I would drive into neighborhoods I never thought I would step foot in. I would lie, cheat, and steal for it. I hurt my family due to my addiction. I took money from the one person that stood by my side, my father. I betrayed my father to continue my addiction. If you were with me, I took you on a ride. A ride you may never have come back from. I would have taken you down farther than I was down. I would have helped you up, but knocked you back down again. Because I portrayed this behavior, I isolated myself from the people I love. I never wanted to hurt people I loved or bring them around my addiction. I did pretty well, considering nobody really knew about it. People may have suspected something wasn't right with me, but it certainly wasn't because of drugs. My addiction progressed to the point that I no longer wanted to live anymore. On October 4th, 2013, I came close to making that dream come true. It was on this day that I planned my suicide. I figured I would kill myself and nobody would care. Remember, this was God's fault all along. Everyone would have just assumed it was due to my depression. I was so embarrassed to admit that I was addicted to drugs. I wanted help, but didn't know how to ask for it. I wanted to die, but I didn't want to kill myself. I was so afraid to tell my father how I've been betraying him all this time. How have I been lying to him? This was not me. This was not the real Chris. This was the Chris masked by drug addiction, and it needed to end. I was so loyal to my father and friends that I thought I had to take my own life so I didn't have to confront my addiction. I sat in a parking lot with a loaded gun in my mouth. I thought about everyone I loved and cared about and stuck a prayer in there. At that time, something came over me. I felt calmness to myself that I've never felt before. I had a moment of clarity and a feeling that a hand was on my shoulder. I didn't end my life, but decided that it was time to come clean with my addiction and deal with the consequences. I told my father, and his reaction was what I expected it to be. My father lost his temper and threw me out of the house. I was homeless with nowhere to go when I received a call from my brother and sister-in-law, who were en route to come get me. They picked me up and let me live with them. I got into a detox program the next day, and then a 28-day rehab program right after. I would have never received the help I needed if it wasn't for my sister-in-law, Erin, and with that, I owe everything I have to her. In my rehab, it was where I learned about my disease and how it affects everyone around me, not just myself. I learned that I can never pick up another drink or drug for the rest of my life, or I will be back just where I left off. But I like to take things one day at a time, as suggested. I took the time there to learn about my defects and how I can change myself to be a better person. I found a God of my understanding, because with the grace of God, my addiction has been uplifted. The biggest help to my disease has been the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have found people who are like me and have the same thought processes that I do. I can call people today and talk about my feelings, when all I used to do was bottle them up with drugs and alcohol. I have a sponsor who has walked me through the steps of becoming a better person without drugs and alcohol, and who has become one of my best friends. I didn't expect to be here today and telling my story, but I am, because of my understanding of a higher power. When I got out of rehab, I had so many questions about a higher power. Through people in the program and meditation, I came to believe that my higher power doesn't have to be the big guy with a beard that is all powerful. He can be sitting right next to you. He can be in everyday beauty, the ocean, music, animals, or family. He is here with me right now, not looking down on me, but sitting with me. He is my eyes, my mind, and my heart. I'm also not going to sit here and tell you I saw the white light and now I am one with God. That never happened. I'm glad that never happened, because it gave me some time to find myself and my own higher power. I still have depression, anxiety, but I don't have to match them with drugs or alcohol. I can talk to other people that have the same thoughts. I live a simple life now. I wake up, I go to work, I come home, take care of the kids. I make sure I set time aside to play with the kids, hang out with my wife, play with my family, hang out. Today, my brother and sister-in-law don't ever have to tell my nephew that his Uncle Chris is no longer around. I've learned a lot in recovery. I've been able to progress as a human being in such a relatively short amount of time. I have gained relationships in recovery that I could never gain elsewhere. In my addiction, I would typically hang out with people or associate myself with people that were just as low as me. Today, I hang out with people, associate myself with people who care, who want to help, who want to be surrounded by me. They want to make sure I'm okay. I want to make sure they're okay. I've gained a whole new family through Alcoholics Anonymous. I gained a whole new family in my personal life. I've gained 3 beautiful children, stepchildren. I've gained a beautiful future wife. Today, I am able to live on my own and self-support myself and my family, and I can take care of anything. I show up today. Anytime anybody calls me, I am there without a question to assist, to help, for no other reason than to just help, with no other underlying reason. I give everything I have to my recovery. Some days are shitty. Some days I think about it. Some days I do miss it. But what I do is I think the drink or the drug through, and I think about where just one drink or just one sort of drug would take me, and I think that all the way through to the end, and it's just not worth it. So thank you for letting me speak here on the phone with you, Shane. I really appreciate it, and that's about it.